Welcome to this video on Research Alignment Part 1, Theory and Framework. We will explore how to ensure proper alignment in a research proposal, focusing on the foundational role of theory and the development of a clear and coherent research framework. Before we move deeper into today's topic, let us first understand what research alignment means. Research alignment refers to the logical connection among all components of a research study, from the title to the research questions, framework, methodology, and the rest of the research structure. Every part must support, reinforce, and make sense in relation to the others. As Ija emphasized, ignoring alignment can be costly. A solid understanding of the subject area, the research technique, and the research design, along with the coherence among all structural elements, can determine the success or failure of the entire research endeavor. In other words, alignment ensures that your study is not only organized, but also intellectually consistent from beginning to end. The focus of this two-part discussions will be on the alignment of the title, theoretical framework or conceptual framework, statement of the problem and method, which could be useful in writing your research proposal or the introduction to methodology. In this two-part discussion, our focus will be on ensuring the proper alignment among several key components of a research proposal. Specifically, we will look at the alignment of the title, the theoretical or conceptual framework, the statement of the problem, and the method. Understanding how these elements connect will help you write a more coherent and academically sound research proposal, particularly in the introduction and methodology sections. For this first lecture, our emphasis will be on the theory and the framework, since these provide the foundation upon which all other parts of the research are built. In this example, I will be using the top-down approach. The best way to apply this approach is to begin by identifying the theory or theories that will guide your study. This is especially useful when your research design is quantitative, since quantitative studies often require clear variables grounded in established theories. However, this approach is not conclusive. You may also use the bottom-up approach, which moves from the specific to the general and is more commonly used in qualitative research designs. But regardless of whether you apply a vertical approach, from general to specific, or a horizontal approach, linking concepts across components, the most important requirement remains the same. Your research paper must demonstrate alignment across all its parts. Theory plays a crucial role in developing meaningful and relevant research questions and answers. It provides direction, structure, and clarity to your investigation. Theory generally takes three basic forms. First, it can be a body of literature that serves as a framework or lens. This allows us to understand a situation more deeply and to propose possible explanations or solutions. Second, theory may function as background information, including vocabulary or assumptions, sometimes implicit, that shape how researchers view a particular phenomenon. Third, theory can take the form of a paradigm, which guides scientific inquiry, influences how knowledge is produced, and frames the conversations within a field. Together, these forms of theory help anchor a study, ensuring that the research questions, methods, and interpretations remain coherent and grounded. In this example, I will be using behaviorism theory as the basis for illustrating research alignment. Please note that for this lecture, we are only taking a small portion of the theory to keep the explanation simple and easy to follow. However, in your actual research proposal, you are expected to discuss the theory appropriately and comprehensively. This includes presenting its core principles, major contributors, and its relevance to your variables and research questions. Here, our purpose is simply to demonstrate how a theory can anchor your framework and guide the rest of your research components. Now, I will be capturing the stimulus-response principle from behaviorism and translating it into a concept that will help us begin formulating a conceptual framework. In this simplified example, the stimulus represents the factor or condition that triggers a reaction, while the response represents the observable behavior or outcome that follows. By identifying these components, we can begin to transform the theory into research variables that can be visually organized within a conceptual framework. This step is essential because it bridges the gap between an abstract theory and the concrete elements that will eventually shape your research design. Now I will be translating the stimulus-response principle into simple research concepts. In this example, the stimulus will be translated into pedagogy, or the instructional approach used by the teacher. The response will be translated into learning, which represents the observable outcomes or behaviors demonstrated by the students. By redefining the stimulus as pedagogy and the response as learning, we create a clear pathway for transforming an abstract theoretical principle into practical concepts that can be developed into a conceptual framework. This step helps bridge theory and application, preparing us to identify variables and visually map the relationships in the next part of the framework. The concept can be further expanded and strengthened through related literature or previous studies. In this example, the discussion highlights 21st century pedagogies and critical thinking. Teachers in the 21st century are expected to adapt their knowledge, skills, and critical thinking to the latest developments in effective learning pedagogies. They must continuously explore ways not only to modify their curriculum when necessary, but also to go beyond standard practice in order to encourage students to acquire essential critical thinking skills. According to Soykert, 2021, this ongoing adaptation is crucial in fostering meaningful learning. By grounding our concepts in literature, we strengthen the connection between the theoretical principle, in this case, stimulus and response, and the more specific ideas of pedagogy and learning. This process also prepares us to construct a conceptual framework supported by credible academic sources. The concept can be further broken down into more specific and measurable components. From our earlier translation, pedagogy becomes 21st century teaching method, while learning can be represented as academic performance. To elaborate further, the 21st century teaching method may include specific strategies such as gamification and flipped learning, both of which have been widely recognized for promoting student engagement and developing higher-order thinking skills. On the other side, academic performance may be examined through the lens of students' development of critical thinking in English, which is a key learning outcome emphasized in many contemporary curricula. By breaking down the concepts this way, we move closer to defining our variables and establishing a clearer structure for our conceptual framework. This process ensures that the framework remains grounded in both theory and literature, while still being specific enough to guide your research questions and methodology. Let's review our direction. Theory is behaviorism, which has the principle of stimulus response. Let us review the direction of our examples so far. We began with the behaviorism theory, which is grounded in the stimulus response principle. We then translated this principle into concepts. The stimulus became pedagogy, and the response became learning. Next, we broke down these concepts further. Pedagogy was translated into the 21st century teaching method, while learning was translated into academic performance. And finally, these were further dissected. The 21st century teaching methods used in this example were gamification and flipped learning, while academic performance was represented by critical thinking in English. Translated into concept, stimulus is pedagogy and response is learning. Which broken down, pedagogy is 21st century teaching method, while learning is academic performance. And further dissected, the 21st century's teaching methods used were gamification and learning, while the academic performance is critical thinking in English. The framework shown here is a simple graphical illustration, created only to help simplify the explanation of the concepts we have discussed. In your actual thesis or research manuscript, the framework should be presented clearly, accurately, and with proper detail. This figure may represent a theoretical framework based on our discussion, from behaviorism to the stimulus response principle, down to the concepts and variables we have derived. However, remember that in real academic writing, it is not enough to show the diagram. Your manuscript must include a clear, comprehensive explanation of the figure, including how each component connects, how it is grounded in theory, and how it supports your research direction. The framework is not just a visual, it is a logical representation of your study's foundation. The conceptual framework could be designed like this. Again, the purpose of this illustration is simply to simplify the explanation and show how the concepts connect based on our earlier breakdown. In actual research writing, the design of your conceptual framework, or what may also be referred to as your paradigm, will depend entirely on the content and clarity of your theory and conceptual discussion. The structure should reflect the logical flow of your variables, the relationships you intend to examine, and the support provided by your literature. A bit of creativity is also encouraged when designing the visual layout of your framework or paradigm, as long as the illustration remains clear, logical, and academically appropriate. Remember, the framework is a visual summary of your study's direction, and it should communicate the relationships among your variables at a glance. Common errors include choosing an unconnected theory, creating a contradictory framework, using unsupported variables, showing misalignment with research questions, or failing to explain the visual framework in writing. Avoid these mistakes for a coherent proposal. In conclusion, theory provides the academic explanation, the framework visually shows variable relationships, and alignment ensures all components of your research proposal form a coherent whole. This ends part 1 of our lecture. Here are the references used in this video. Thank you. Please watch part 2 for the continuation on research alignment.